Cherry opened her eyes, sweetly yawned, and stretched. Last night's party was great, and the night was simply fantastic. Yes, she got what she wanted. Casey is hers now. It's just a pity that he is being drafted into the army, but he will come back, and they can continue where they left off. Casey was her classmate, and yesterday they saw him off to the army. There was a feast, well wishes for good service, and Casey's parents were barely hiding their worry while the guests had fun. Jerry was among them. They had nothing in common at school. Casey was serious, calm, and dreamed of being in the military, while Jerry was like a dragonfly. She was light, cheerful, and often had affairs with guys. Her mother, Rebecca, often looked for her wayward daughter at night, but Cherry didn't care. She lived for today and didn't think about her future life or studies. However, she had liked Casey for a long time and directly showed that she liked him. But Casey did not react in any way and then came to the farewell party for the army. Casey drank too much and became so cheerful and relaxed. Kissed, and then it started to rain, and they took shelter on the terrace of an abandoned house. That's when it all happens. Casey sobered up later and apologized, but Cherry just smiled happily. "My little fool," she whispered. "I love you, and I will wait for you to come back from the army." "Really?" the guy asked, a little bewildered. "Of course, we are together now and forever," Cherry replied. The next morning, she woke up happy, put on her best dress, and let her hair down. "Oh, how dressed up you are. Where are you going?" her mother asked anxiously. "I'm going to see my groom off to the army," answered Jerry, hiding her happy eyes. Casey's mother gasped. "Honey, you weren't even dating, were you?" "That's not a big deal because we have just started dating," smiled Cherry, and ran out of the house. People were gathering at the rural council. Casey was standing with his parents. Jerry ran straight to him and hugged him tightly. "Oh, my Casey, my dear, how much I will miss you," she bubbled, holding him tightly. At first, he was confused and blushing, but then he hugged her back and kissed her in front of his mother. "Just wait for me," he said. Then he whispered to his mother and father that Jerry was his girlfriend from now on. Sylvia frowned. She didn't like the frivolous girl. Soon a bus arrived from the military commissariat, and Casey laughed. Jerry watched the dust-covered bus driving away and thought that maybe she was wrong to have started all this. 2 years without seeing her sweetheart was ahead. But he was such a handsome guy. No, she felt it in her guts, a big fish she had caught in her net. At home, a serious conversation awaited her with her mother. "Sweetie, if you have told the whole village that you will be waiting for Casey, then wait. Don't disgrace yourself or me," the mother said from the doorstep. "Mom, why don't you believe me? What if it is a law?" Cherry smiled. "Law, God willing. But when I remember you started dating boys from the 8th grade, my heart tightens. Mommy, it's all in the past. I am different now. It's all serious." Rebecca just sighed. She raised her daughter herself. Her husband died in a motorcycle accident when Cherry was 2. She worked multiple jobs her whole life to make sure her daughter never lacked anything. But Cherry accepted it for granted and did not appreciate it. Rebecca was worried about her daughter. Her heart was hurting. Frankly speaking, her heart often disturbed Rebecca. The doctors had recommended surgery, but there was no money for it. Meanwhile, Cherry took on the role of Casey's bride, walking around the village seriously, respectfully greeting his parents. And a month later, the girl realized she was pregnant. She was upset, A child wasn't part of her plans yet. She was going to marry Casey first. She didn't go to the hospital. It scared her. Furthermore, she kept quiet for as long as she could, dragging it on. And then, when Rebecca realized everything, it was already too late to think about what to do. Although it was scary for Cherry, she took herself in hand and wrote a letter to Casey, informing him of the baby. Then she went to his parents and told them everything. Casey's child, you say? Celia snorted, not at all happy with this news. Well, we will see when you give birth. Casey will return and decide everything himself. Cherry was hurt by the coldness of her future mother-in-law, but she didn't show it. And soon, Casey wrote that he did not refuse the child. Cherry was thrilled. Yes, she didn't plan for this baby, but everything was working out perfectly. And let the future in-laws look askance. The main thing was that Casey trusted her, and the baby indeed was his. Cherry gave birth in early February. When she first looked at her daughter, her eyes were clouded. What's wrong with her? Cherry asked the midwife in horror, gazing at the reddish face of her newborn daughter. Don't worry so much, the woman replied gently. Your daughter was born with a cleft lip, but it can be treated perfectly. Just later, you will manage. She will be a beauty. Take her away, Cherry said with disgust. The midwife just shrugged. It's stress, probably. The next day, a neonatologist came to Cherry's ward. Overall, your daughter is healthy. Be patient. We will put you on the waiting list. We will definitely do the surgery before she turns 1. These children grow and develop normally with proper care. Cherry listened absent-mindedly, nodding, thinking about her own problems. How could she tell Casey about everything now? What if he refuses? What should she do? Rebecca immediately flew to the maternity hospital to comfort her daughter. Don't cry, dear, she said. We will definitely get through this. Besides, Casey will come back from the army and help. Cherry seemed to agree with her mother. After leaving the hospital, Rebecca went straight to Sylvia and Bernie, Casey's parents. Though they had not yet admitted the newborn as their granddaughter and were waiting for their son to come back, Rebecca still wanted to ask for their help. The doctor said that money would make the operation quicker, but in the hallway, Rebecca heard the weeping of Casey's mother. She cautiously looked into the house and saw the future in-laws sitting on the couch and crying. There was some kind of paper next to them. Rebecca picked up the sheets, read it, and her hands trembled. It was a letter from the military unit where Casey served. The commander of the unit wrote that Casey died as an hero while guarding the borders, and that he was buried there. My dear son, Celia lamented. You haven't even seen. They didn't even let me say goodbye to you. Bernie lowered his head, shedding a meager, manly tear. Rebecca also started crying. How could this happen? He was so young. Celia, Bernie, I'm sorry, Rebecca said finally. We are with you. I can't even imagine your pain, but you need to pull yourself together and live, at least for the sake of your granddaughter. Granddaughter? Celia asked unexpectedly, her tone firm. My son never told me he had a daughter, and I don't believe it. People are spreading rumors that the girl was born with a cleft lip. Are you trying to make us care about a child with a disability? It won't work. Celia, what's wrong with you? Bernie muttered. Maybe she is really our granddaughter. I don't believe it. Celia stood her ground. Now my son can be blamed for any man's children. Get out of here. She shouted at Rebecca. Rebecca backed away towards the door, clutching her heart. She didn't expect to be treated like this. She barely made it home. her heart feeling like it might burst from the pain. Luckily, her neighbor came to visit and called for an ambulance. Rebecca was taken to the hospital with a heart attack and stayed there for a month. When she returned home, only Cherry was waiting for her. "Where is your daughter?" Rebecca asked bewilderedly, looking at the empty crib she had bought for her. "I left her in the hospital," Jerry unexpectedly replied boldly. "When I found out that Casey died, I decided I didn't need a child like her. It is difficult for a single woman with a child, but with such a special one. Moreover, who would need me?" "She is your own flesh and blood," Rebecca whispered, looking at her daughter with horror. She couldn't believe that she had raised her like this. How had she gone so wrong? Why had Jerry become this way? "I don't need this flesh and blood," Jerry declared sharply. Her own grandparents refused her. "I called them from the maternity ward and asked them to take us home, but they told me she wasn't their granddaughter. Therefore, if she is not theirs, then she is not mine either." "How heartless you are." Rebecca shook her head and went to the hospital to get her granddaughter. The baby was still in the pediatric ward. She lay there, unwanted by anyone. Rebecca convinced the chief to let her take the girl, saying that Cherry would come to her senses. The doctor agreed that it was better for the baby to be with her relatives. Everything was settled. Rebecca returned home with little Leah, the name she had given her granddaughter. The front door was locked. Rebecca thought maybe Cherry had gone to the store. She entered the house, unfolded the blankets, and looked at the girl. She lay quietly and looked at her grandmother maturely, as if she understood that not everything was okay with her. "It's okay, granddaughter, we will manage. Mommy will be here soon," Rebecca said as she swaddled the baby. "Now you will eat and sleep, and this evening you will take a bath." Rebecca fussed over the baby and occasionally glanced at the clock, worried why Cherry did not return for so long. Then the neighbor visited her and said that she had seen Cherry at the bus stop with a suitcase. She said she was leaving forever. The neighbor said, hiding her eyes. "I tried to convince her, saying that her mother had a heart attack and her daughter needed treatment, but she just brushed me off." Rebecca wiped tears from her cheek. "Oh, Martha, I'm scared. Can I handle this alone?" "Don't worry, we will figure it out somehow. There are still good people in the world," the older woman said. 20 years had passed. Jerry had lived in the capital for a long time since that spring evening when she left the village. She never returned there. She never talked to her mother. Jerry decided to start her life anew. She left the village, taking her mother's last savings, and rented a small apartment with them. Then she got a job as a waitress and met a promising man who even wanted to marry her. He didn't have time. He turned out to be bandits and died in a fight. But Jerry didn't despair. She soon found another candidate. He turned out to be married though. But nevertheless, it was fine for Cherry. He supported her for several years and then suddenly left with his wife for a permanent residency abroad, leaving Cherry with nothing. Then there were a few romances, nothing special, and a couple of years ago, Jerry settled down with a wealthy senior man. He even bought an apartment for her, and everything was good, except he died recently, and his heirs left Cherry with nothing. They even managed to take away her apartment. Jerry had a little money left in her accounts, so she had to start from scratch again and find a job. But where should she go? Back to a cafe? At first, Cherry snorted, but then she had to get a job at a dinner because she had no money, and her rich suitors had disappeared over the years. And so, Jerry carried trays, cleaned dishes, and there was one thought spinning in her head. How was her home village? And how was her mother? Is she probably dead by now? Her heart was weak, after all. For the first time in many years, Cherry felt guilty for her actions. She didn't think about her daughter. That was her mistake. She bet on the wrong partner in her youth. But her mother, yes, she was ashamed before her. And Cherry decided to make amends to Rebecca, even if it meant visiting her grave. She took a week off and went to her hometown. To her surprise, the village had not disappeared from the earth. On the contrary, it had grown. Strong houses had appeared, and the road was paved. Cherry walked from the bus stop, amazed. Nobody recognized her, and she didn't remember anyone. She reached her childhood home and froze. It was old and crooked among the neighboring houses. It looked like an alien. The shutters were closed, and the door was locked. Mom has passed away. Cherry sighed sadly. She decided to go to the cemetery to find her mother's grave, and then the regular bus would arrive. She would be back in the city before dark. The cemetery was near the village, and soon Cherry was already looking for her mother's grave. An elderly woman and a young girl were at one fresh grave, tying wreaths near and fixing artificial flowers in vases so that the wind wouldn't blow them away. Cherry decided to ask them about her mother. As soon as she got closer, she suddenly froze and turned pale. She whispered. The elderly woman trembled and turned around. Yes, it was Rebecca, older, still alive. Cherry said, sighed heavily, and sat on the bench by the grave. The girl looked surprised at the stranger with the big blue eyes, then looked nervously at the elderly woman. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked. "Yes, everything's fine. You go home, sweetie. I need to talk to this woman." "Okay, I will wait for you by the fence, Leonard." She looked at the stranger again and walked along the path towards the exit. Cherry looked at her, confused. Was this her daughter? She was so beautiful. What about the cleft lip she was born with? "Yes, Cherry, this is your daughter," Rebecca whispered quietly. "I named her Leah. See how beautiful she has grown? And do you know why? Because love and care work miracles. When you run away, taking my last bit of money, I thought I would go crazy. I couldn't even buy bread. But Leah needed food. Fortunately, the neighbors helped, and Sylvia and Bernie came to their senses later, and we raised Leah together. She had surgery when she was less than a year old. Then there were 2 more, but that's another story. We coped, daughter, as you can see, and you run away from the difficulties. Have you found a good life? Rebecca asked. No, I'm fine, Cherry lied. But you thought I died a long time ago, and your daughter too. As you can see, no. Bernie recently died. He was seriously ill. Even so, Casey drove him to the capital. It didn't help. Oncology and age. But Casey helped me too. They did heart surgery on me, and he paid for it. Casey. Cherry turned pale. Yes, daughter, it's the same Casey, Leah's father. But there was a mistake back then, and they confused him with another guy. Casey was taken captive, and after 6 months, he was released. He didn't want to be a soldier anymore. He took up farming. Why do you think our village has become more beautiful? Many thanks to Casey. He has a farm, fields, dairy production. That's it, daughter. You shouldn't have run away. Then they say the darkest hour is before the dawn. Casey adopted Leah and married a good girl, Antonella. They raised Leah like her own. Casey took me into his home. We are one big family. Why did you come? Are you in trouble? Rebecca asked. No, everything's good with me, Cherry mumbled. Rebecca got up from the bench, touched Cherry's hand, and looked into her eyes. That's fine. We met and it's good. Now I'm leaving. Leah is waiting. She is not only beautiful but smart too. She is studying at medical school and wants to be a surgeon. The elderly woman froze for a second, looking at her daughter. Then she crossed herself, turned around, and walked to the gate where Leah was waiting for her. "Grandma, is that her?" Leah whispered when Rebecca approached her. The girl knew she wasn't Antonella's biological daughter, but she took it calmly and always felt that Antonella loved her with real motherly love. "Yes, it's her," Rebecca replied. "What does she want?" Leah asked. "She thought I was dead, but I'm alive," Rebecca smiled. "And everything's good with us. Let's go home. Dad and Mama are waiting." Jerry sat on the bench in shock. Casey is alive. Their daughter is beautiful. Mom is alive. They have a big house, and she... What did she have? She got up from the bench and walked towards the bus stop, feeling a mix of regrets and hope. Maybe it wasn't too late to change, to rebuild the broken relationships, and to find her place in this family. She took a deep breath and bought a ticket back to the city, determined to make amends and be there for her daughter and mother from now on. As the bus drove away, Cherry couldn't help but think about the second change life had given her, and she vowed to herself that she would seize it and never let go. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.